Mark Carney just landed in Mumbai, and the message was clear from the moment the plane touched down. Canada is open for business, and India is the new priority. The two-way trade target, $51 billion a year by 2030. That's more than double what it is today. Uranium, liquefied natural gas, critical minerals, potash, artificial intelligence, nuclear energy. The agenda is immense, the potential is real, and both sides know it. If you believe this analysis matters, subscribe and hit like. It helps us keep going. But here's what didn't make the official itinerary. The same week Carney boarded that plane, Vancouver police showed up at the door of Moninder Singh, head of the Sikh Federation of Canada, with a warning. A credible threat against his life, and against his wife, and against his two children. It was the fourth such warning he has received since the 2023 assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Two things happened at the same time. Canada's Prime Minister flew to India to build a partnership, and Canada's police warned a Canadian citizen that his family might be killed. That is the real story of this trip.
Huge. We are hoping that something would be announced possibly for uranium, the Canadian uranium coming to India. Similarly, for liquefied natural gas, crude. So there is a great potential, especially critical minerals for electric vehicles, is needed.
The logic behind this trip is not complicated. Trump's tariffs hit Canadian steel, aluminum, and auto parts. The old playbook, rely on the American market, manage the relationship, wait it out, is finished. Carney knows it. So he's building an alternative architecture. China last month, India this week, Australia and Japan after that. India fits perfectly into this strategy. The world's most populous country, the fastest growing major economy, energy hungry, resource deficient, and sitting on a consumer base of 1.4 billion people that Canadian exporters have barely touched. The premiers of Saskatchewan and New Brunswick flew with Carney. That tells you everything about what's on the table.
When you hear discussions around whether it be expansions of TMX or additional oil capacity to the west coast of Canada, this is one of the markets that those discussions are about.
This is not a photo op. This is pipeline strategy. This is uranium export strategy. This is Canada deciding at the highest level that the Indo-Pacific is no longer a secondary market. It is the primary alternative to American dependency. And to get there, Carney had to do something his predecessor refused to do. He had to quietly set aside the most explosive diplomatic dispute in recent Canadian history. In June 2023, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Canadian citizen, a Khalistan advocate, was shot dead in Surrey, British Columbia. 3 months later, Justin Trudeau stood in the House of Commons and accused agents of the Indian government of orchestrating the killing on Canadian soil. India called the allegations preposterous. Diplomats were expelled on both sides, relations collapsed. That was 16 months ago. This week, an unnamed senior Canadian government official briefing reporters ahead of Carney's departure said the alleged activity is, quote, not continuing. India, the official said, is no longer a security threat, not a formal statement, not a press conference, an anonymous briefing. And that's where the story fractures. Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangari was asked multiple times whether he agreed with that assessment. He would not confirm it. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand was asked directly whether India is no longer considered a threat. She evaded the question. What she said instead, discussions on transnational violence are ongoing at the highest levels. Ongoing, not resolved. Ongoing. So what is the official Canadian position? The Prime Minister's office issued a statement, and the language is precise enough to be worth examining closely.
Canada will continue to take measures to combat any forms of transnational repression, transnational organized crime, and any contravention of the criminal code or rule of law on Canadian soil. Respect for the ongoing law enforcement dialogue will continue to be the basis of our step-by-step approach to re-engagement with India. In Ottawa.
Read it carefully. Canada will continue to combat transnational repression. Will continue. Present tense, future commitment. If the threat had genuinely stopped, if India was truly no longer a security concern, you don't say we will continue to combat it. You say the matter has been resolved. The language of the PMO and the language of the anonymous briefing are not the same thing. One says the problem is over. The other says the fight continues. Both are coming from the same government on the same day. That is not a communications error. That is a managed contradiction. And it's being managed because Carney needs both things to be true simultaneously. India as a safe partner for trade, and Canada as a country that still takes transnational repression seriously. The problem is that 1.4 million Indo-Canadians are watching, and they are not unified. In Toronto's Gerrard India Bazaar, business owners are celebrating. Finally, 2 years of frozen relations are thawing. Finally, the economic potential of the world's largest democracy is being taken seriously. That perspective is legitimate. It is rational. It is shared by the Business Council of Canada, whose CEO, Goldie Hyder, himself Indo-Canadian, said Carney is right not to get distracted by diaspora political events. But Balpreet Singh, legal counsel for the World Sikh Organization of Canada, used a different word: betrayal. It feels like a betrayal. It feels like our community doesn't really matter. And Liberal MP Sukh Dhaliwal, whose constituents include many Sikh Canadians, said he's hearing that harassment and threats are ongoing and demanded clarity on why an anonymous official declared the threat over.
When it comes to rule of law and Canadian lives, uh, they are the one, and Canadian sovereignty, they take priority over everything else.
That is a member of Carney's own political family drawing a line: rule of law, Canadian lives, Canadian sovereignty, above everything else, including trade. Carney heard that and he made a choice anyway. Compare this to Justin Trudeau's 2018 visit to India: Bhangra dancing, elaborate Indian outfits, a tour of the Taj Mahal, an invitation extended, accidentally, to a convicted criminal with ties to Sikh extremism. That trip became a global embarrassment. India's government mocked it. Canadian media dissected every misstep for weeks. Carney's approach is the exact inversion: no Golden Temple, no Punjab visit, no symbolic gestures toward the Sikh community that has been a defining political force in Canadian electoral politics for decades. Pure business. Mumbai for the CEOs, Delhi for Modi, and nothing in between that could generate the wrong image. It is a strategically coherent decision. It signals to India that Canada is serious, adult, and not hostage to internal diaspora politics. But it also sends a signal to 1.6 million Indo-Canadians with roots in Punjab. You are not in this equation, not this week, not on this trip. That signal will have a political cost. Carney is calculating that the economic gain is worth it. Here is why that calculation might be correct, and why it might be a precedent Canada will regret. The case for the deal is straightforward. Canada cannot afford to be economically dependent on a single partner that has openly threatened to absorb it as a 51st state. Diversification is not a preference. It is a survival strategy. And India, with its scale, its growth trajectory, its energy hunger, and its alignment with democratic values, is the single most logical alternative anchor in the Indo-Pacific. A uranium supply agreement worth approximately 2.8 billion Canadian dollars over 10 years is being discussed. A framework for a comprehensive economic partnership agreement covering most goods and services could be finalized within 12 months if talks proceed as hoped. Canadian pension funds have already invested nearly $100 billion in Indian infrastructure. The foundation is already there. The case against, or at least for caution, is equally clear. Canada is effectively signaling to every state actor in the world that if the economic relationship is large enough, accountability for the killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil can be managed quietly through ongoing dialogue without public resolution, without formal acknowledgement, and without justice. That is a precedent, and precedents compound. 4 Indian nationals currently face charges in Canadian courts for the Nijar killing. The legal process is ongoing. The RCMP investigation is not closed. What happens to those proceedings if Canada's diplomatic posture shifts to the matter is not continuing? What message does that send to other Canadian citizens who may be targeted by foreign state actors in the future? These are not hypothetical questions. Moninder Singh is living the answer right now. His wife and children are under credible threat, and Canada's Prime Minister is in Mumbai signing memoranda of understanding. Carney is not Trudeau. He does not govern by gesture or headline. He governs by architecture, by building structures that last, by positioning Canada for a world in which American dominance can no longer be assumed. That is the right instinct. India is the right destination. The economic logic is sound, but leadership is not just strategy, it is also the answer to a simple question. Whose safety do you protect when protecting it is inconvenient? Canada does not react to events, it shapes them. Canada does not improvise alliances, it builds them, but a Canada that trades the safety of its citizens for the size of a deal is not a middle power, it is just a market. Carney has 5 days to show he can be both. The business community is watching, the Sikh community is watching, and Moninder Singh's family is hoping someone in Ottawa is still watching too. If this kind of analysis is useful to you, subscribe, share, and leave a comment below. Tell us what you think Carney should prioritize on this trip.